Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. And I am going to have a guest today that is going to talk to us about leveraging up. I'm excited about that because if anybody needs leveraging up, it's yours truly. This lady is a rock star. We're going to talk to her how she grew her LinkedIn following, how she works with clients to brand themselves the right way, a connector of people, which really speaks to me to help everyone grow. You can find her on LinkedIn at Deanna Russo, R-U-S-S-O, and Deanna is spelled D-E-A-N-N-A. But right now, right here, you can find her on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Deanna, how are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, I don't know if I'd be that excited. Wait till we get into this conversation. And then, people will say that they're like, Brian, I'm so excited to be here. I'm like, why? We haven't even started talking yet. You may find 20. Yeah. You may find 20 minutes in. You're like, oh no, this is a train wreck. No, listen, I want to start here. The connector word really, and I'm not going to say connects, but it resonates with me because when I wrote my book, People Buy From People, that was what I wanted to do. I got about halfway through the book and I was like, this is a book about connection. And I took it off of something my dad told me when he said, never forget people buy from people. And I thought my dad was talking to me about sales. He was actually talking to me about connection. So what is the one thing? Well, let's start here. What's the one thing about connection that people don't know about connection? Because they'll say, I'm going to connect with this person on LinkedIn. I'm going to connect with this person here, connect with this person there. And it's almost like they have two different meanings. So what's the one thing as you talk to folks, what is the one thing that it's kind of that thing of, I don't know if you really get the idea of connection. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So you can say that I want to connect with this person on LinkedIn, okay? Because you send them a connection request. So that's how you invite someone to be part of your network. But to really connect with someone, you need to get to know that person as much as you can offline. And it could be an online connection. It can be an offline connection, but the first place that I go to learn about someone is their LinkedIn profile and to see what makes that person tick. What's the story? Why does that person do what he or she does? And so I think you can say the word connect, but in essence, you really need to get to know the person to officially and authentically connect with someone.
I love that too, because that was one of the chapters in the book too, People Buy Authenticity. And again, I've never understood this. You don't see it more on the LinkedIn platform, to your point. It was a really nice point that you made. But on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, it almost appears like that people are misrepresenting themselves, the different handles and things like that. In your experience, Deanna, what causes people to misrepresent themselves instead of being authentic?
I think people, when you say the word branding and personal brand, they feel like they need to develop an alias, another persona, because people won't buy from them. So if they develop a brand that is not them, then they're more likely to engage with that person. But I feel like you can say that you're authentic, but if your words don't speak for that, if your words don't speak toward that, then it's just another word. You're just using the slang and saying authentic because it's one of those keywords. So you really, your actions and your words speak louder than what you call yourself.
Yeah. And I love what you said there about alias, because here's the thing. A lot of people, when they hear the word alias, they think, okay, somebody that's trying to do something criminalistic, or they're trying to do something nefarious or something like that. But really, and I've had a couple of other people lately talk to me about imposter syndrome, because again, I have always tried to show up authentically. You know, who I am is who I am. I don't have, when I do live radio, I don't use a false name or anything like that. When I write, it's all me. It's 100%. I've always just been like, well, why would I do that? Why would I have a pen name, for writing and things like that? When it comes to developing that, is it more that fear takes over, that people are afraid of, well, if they got to know the real me, they would not like what they see? Or is it just, I mean, which side? Let me drop back for just a minute and ask the question this way. Why is it that people tend to go to one extreme or the other, instead of trying to find that midway point that kind of brings out who they want to be and who they are? Because I would think that when people do that, and I don't mean to ask a long-winded question, but for a little more context, it's almost like people that come up with an alias. It's like that's who they want to be, and who they really are is over here. So why not bring those two things to the middle?
Because they see other people online, and they think that because that person has 1 million followers, 5 million followers, that's the type of person that you, if I am John Doe and I see someone online who has such a big following and has such a big brand, that could be intimidating for me, because maybe they don't want to see me. Maybe they want to see that person. So if I don't develop myself into that person or something like that person, they won't see who I am. So honestly, I think that if, in essence, while social media can really connect us, I mean, honestly, I feel more connected to some people around the world than I do people in my own hometown sometimes because of LinkedIn. But on the other hand, social media can also give us a false expectation of who someone is too. So there has to be a happy medium. Honestly, I feel like the more vulnerable I get when I post on social media, and the more I show my true self, the more that people can relate with who I am.
Yeah. And that reminds me, Deanna, of Henry Winkler, who played the Fonz on the iconic 70s TV show Happy Days. Henry Winkler said the Fonz was everything that I wasn't. He created that persona. And I saw a story the other day where someone was talking about it, and Henry Winkler said, I've never ridden a motorcycle in my life. You know, and Henry Winkler talked about being dyslexic, and he talked about growing up and being, smaller than everybody else and getting picked on and things like that. And he said when he had the opportunity to create the Fonzie character, that was all the things that he wanted to be in his life. I want to pull out something that you said just a minute ago, as far as growing a large network and things like that, and having a large network. Is there a fear in getting such a large network? Do you see folks that are afraid of getting their networks too large? Because here's why I asked that question. I think to a large degree, that's the goal of most people. It's like, I want to get a big network, and I want to do this, I want to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I can also see the flip side of, if I get too big too fast, or I get a large network, then I lose some of that privacy, or I lose some of myself, or I feel married to continue to feed the machine, so to speak. Talk about how to overcome some of those things. If somebody's listening and they go, I would love to do that, but I'm so afraid of having to be a servant to that machine and feeding that beast, so to speak.
I totally understand that. I understand that. So here is what I would say about growing your network. Connect with people that you can relate with. And whether that is 500 or 5,000, if you relate with those people and you can have conversations with those people and you can be authentic and be yourself with those people, then it doesn't matter if you have 20,000 or if you have 20. As long as you can be yourself with those people, then that's why I call, when I connect with someone and someone says, thank you for connecting, I say, thank you for joining my LinkedIn family. And it's a lot for me to say family, because family means a lot to me. But I feel like, honestly, if I had an issue offline that I needed to tell people about who are connected with me on LinkedIn, I feel like I could. Honestly, I feel like I could open myself up. And that's why I feel like whoever I bring in to my network is considered part of my family. So for people who don't know other people that they're connecting with, it's one of my most asked questions. How do I decide whether I want to let that person into my network? Well, number one, does that person have value to you? Does that person offer value? Can you relate with something that person says or does, or whether it is the business that he or she is in, or whether it's the city that he or she is in, or perhaps you went to the same school? Can you relate with something? Can you identify with that person? And it doesn't have to be someone in the US. Honestly, I have connections internationally that, because they're in social media or content marketing or online marketing, I'm more attracted to people who have a similar background than I am. And I'm just saying that those are the people that I'm more likely to connect with, because I feel like I can have conversations with them.
Well, Deanna, I've done that too. And someone asked me, they said, a good friend of mine that I connected with on LinkedIn, he's become a great friend. He said, why do you continue to do your podcast? And I said, because of the relationships that I build with people. And I had someone reach out to me the other day on LinkedIn, sent me an in message and said, hi, all they said was, hi, Brian. To me, that kind of idea, that's, I get a little weirded out about that. But I sent this person a message back and I said, I'm always curious to understand why people want to reach out and connect with me, because I feel humbled. I really do. I get that sense of sometimes it's a humbling thing when people want to reach out and connect with me. And I said, I'm always curious what causes people to connect. What made you choose to connect with me? But the second thing that I said, keep in mind that if you're going to ask me about buying something or doing something, that I value relationship building first and foremost, and understand up front that I'm probably not going to do that until we have solidified a relationship. I'm not going to, because a lot of friends of mine that have way bigger followings than I do talk about people reaching out and cold pitching and things like that. Yep. And it becomes a situation where it's almost akin to a stalker, that you're like, okay, why did you choose me? Why did you want to connect with me? When someone, and I mean to interrupt you, but you were hitting on something really vital there. So when someone reaches out to connect with you, what is more important to you? Is it that they're in the same industry as you are? Or is it more important that they say, hey, you and I have a mutual connection and they recommended that I reach out to connect with you, so I wanted to do that? What is more important to you?
It could be both. It could be this person, I saw you engaging on this person's post and I really liked what you said. And so I wanted to connect with you. I have had people do that said, I saw your comment on her post and I wanted to connect with you. And that's awesome, because that means that my engagement in other people's posts means so much to me, that my comments are being recognized and validated, I guess you could say. And the people are recognizing me. So it could be like, the answer to your question is all of the above. They could be in the same space as me. They could recognize me from engaging with other people. They could have gone to my profile because they went to search LinkedIn strategist or whatever it is, and I popped up. So it could be any number of reasons why people want to connect with me. The one thing that I do have a problem with is if someone wants to connect with me just because I have a large following. And no one will actually say that, but I can see by going to someone's profile, and I can see if someone is trying on LinkedIn. I can see if someone has taken the time to put in a good profile picture, to write a headline that they're proud of, to write even one sentence in an about section, to take the time to craft a banner image. If someone looks like they're actually trying to create a profile for themselves, I give them the benefit of the doubt. And often, Brian, what I do is I give the benefit of the doubt. And if someone goes against that trust, whether it be 24 hours later, whether it be a week later, whether it be 2 weeks later, then they get blocked. And the number of people who are part of my LinkedIn family and the number of people who are blocked is like a 95% to a 5% ratio.
Yeah.
So there's more good people out there than bad.
And Deanna, the thing about it is, and we'll say this, I'll say this and we'll step aside and take a quick break, is that I love it when my friends on LinkedIn say, Brian, you need to be connected to this person. Because it shows them, Deanna, that they care about me, they care about our relationship, and they care about it enough that they want to connect me with someone else that they feel that can add value to my network. And that's how we got connected. It was forgive me, I forget who it was, but they were like, you need to connect to Deanna. Like, and I have people that I know, and you probably do too, that when they say that, it's automatic. Like, yeah, I trust them. I trust them that much that they care for enough for me that they'll go, you need to get, I'm like, done. You know, that's how powerful their influence is. Let's step aside, take a quick break. We come back. We are going to talk more about leveraging up. I want to know about leveraging up, Deanna. And so we'll get into more of that here in just a moment on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton here. I want to tell you about our sponsor, SEO National. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now, what's that, you might say? Well, search engine optimization helps you show up higher on search engines in front of paying customers for words that you as a business owner can monetize. What a great concept. SEO National is owned by my good buddy Damon Burton, who's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Not only has Damon and his team worked with businesses of all sizes, from e-commerce startups to NBA teams and Shark Tank featured businesses, but more importantly, Damon and his team are about transparency, trust, and providing lifetime value. So much so that he still has his first customers after opening SEO National 14 years ago. Let me give you some intentional encouragement and call Damon and his team today at 855-736-6285 or go to www.seonational.com and get a free quote.
Deanna, got to tell me about leveraging up. I now, you know, I saw that on your LinkedIn profile with the hashtag leverage up. And then before we started recording it's your banner, so to speak, leveraging up. Tell me where that came from and what it means.
When I started this company, it was about a year ago. And I started it with the intention of helping people. And I feel like I am using my experience on LinkedIn. I grew my following from 400 in the summer of 2018 to over 11,000 in about 18 months. I now have 21,000. But for me, it's not about the numbers, and I'll get to that in a minute. But honestly, Leverage Up came from a place where if I can help people take their brand, take their company to the next level, that's what this is all about. So whether it has to do with LinkedIn, whether it has to do without LinkedIn, whatever I can do to help people grow themselves, grow their capacity to the next level, that's what it's all about.
I love that because, and I'm just taking some notes here for those of you watching on YouTube. I always want to take notes because in Deanna, I feel the same way you did. My network grew from 2017. I was at about 400 connections and followers. And I really started, that's when I started getting active. But I've never been concerned, and I'm not anywhere near that. I'm probably in the 3,500 range of followers and connections. I have a little different approach. I feel like that people that I connect to your point, I want to build a relationship with those people. And I'm not that overly concerned because I know that great networks in time grow like you did, like your network, building to that point. Rome wasn't built in a day. And so I just understand that, growth is going to come naturally. It's as the more you do it, things like that. What was your one aha moment? And again, I don't want you to give away your secret sauce or anything like that, but what was your aha moment that you said, this is an opportunity for me to grow even more exponentially?
I think when the late summer, early fall of 2018, when I was sending messages to people who I didn't know, so those cold call DMs, and all I was getting back was crickets, I realized this platform is not about that. This LinkedIn is not about salesy type pitches. But when I started engaging with people and started having conversations with people, both offline and online, then I realized, okay, this is what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And then the engagement, partnering up with my content. And when I was able to show myself and peel a layer of that onion and show this is what Deanna is and this is what she does, then it was a very good, happy medium. So when I started my company, it just kind of made sense that we would work on your profile, and that's the foundation piece. And then we would work on engagement, and then we would work on content. And those are the three main parts of my strategy and how I work with people. Is you got to have a little bit of everything, because one piece of the puzzle is not going to make it all work.
Yeah, it's like trying to get healthier, but saying to yourself, all I'm going to do is eat fruits and vegetables. You need to have the protein and the carbohydrates and everything. It's got to be balanced and things like that. Because here's the thing, and in full disclosure, I don't get on LinkedIn every day. And I have seen people that, and I have seen people that says, well, you got to show up every day and you got to post 2 or 3 times. And there's nothing, and they're friends of mine. There's nothing wrong with that. For me, I just feel like, and I'm being completely transparent here, Deanna.
Yeah.
I feel like for me that there are days that I just need a break from social media, that I'm going to be intentional about saying, okay. And for me, Mondays are that day. We go to church on Sunday, and I feel like Monday is like that day of, I'm probably not going to take in much media, if any media at all. No news, no sports, and just really discipline my mind in that area. Is it okay not to post every day?
Yes. When I started posting my videos, it was Halloween of 2018. And I was only posting videos every Tuesday and every Friday. And that was for over a year. So honestly, To have someone say you need to be posting every single day, no. But that being said, Brian, if you were to show up on a Monday and you were to engage with 3 or 4 people in 30 minutes, then you can get offline. So you don't have to be there for 8 or 10 hours a day.
I love that. Please repeat that, Deanna. That is so good because, well, here's the thing, because I think people, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think people misconstrue the concept of that, because the reason that I did that, Deanna, was I was feeling, and especially toward the end of the year, I took about an 8 or 9 day break from January 1 to about the 8th or 9th because I was feeling tethered to my phone. I was feeling tethered, and I was like, I don't like this. I don't like being married. And I guess for me, the kind of the fear is of posting every day. And I alluded to it a minute ago, is if I post every day, then I have to post every day. And I may not feel like posting every day, and I may not have something to say. I guess for me, that fear, not that fear, but that trepidation is, as an intentional encourager, you feel like you have to have something encouraging to say every day. And there are days it's harder than other days. And I know that there are people that are going, Deanna, I love what you're saying, but how do we strike that happy medium? And you're engaged with 3 or 4 people for 30 minutes. Have you ever found yourself kind of doing that same thing? Like, I'm only going to be on the platform for 30 minutes or 45 minutes today. And how did you discipline yourself with that time constraint of saying, I'm going to be as engaged as I can be in a set amount of time?
I think it is about setting that clock, even if it has to be a timer on your phone, a timer on your computer, whatever it is, to say, I'm going to spend this amount of time and then I am going to get offline. And honestly, as a mom of 3 and someone that juggles a lot in her life, there are times where you just have to disconnect. You have to disconnect because there's other priorities in your life. And so today is my daughter's birthday. And there is going to be some time tonight that I'm not online. And why? Because it's the child's birthday.
Happy birthday. Yes.
Something has to give. So honestly, it's about being strategic. The entire thing that I teach on LinkedIn has a strategy behind it. If you are going in without a strategy and you're just comment, like, why am I not getting enough out of this? It's because you don't have a strategy. Do you know who your ideal client is? Do you know who you want to connect with? Do you know who you don't want to connect with? Those are all questions to ask when you're trying to go about working this platform or working any social media platform to the fullest advantage.
I love that. And I love what you said about knowing your ideal connections, because, and I've said this, look, encouragement is universal. Connection is universal. But there's sometimes that maybe it's not good for you to be connected with somebody, even if they have a large platform. And I'll give you, for instance, there are some people that we just don't see eye to eye on certain philosophies, and that's okay. That it doesn't make them wrong, and it doesn't make me right, and it doesn't make me right and them wrong. It is, we just don't see eye to eye. It's probably not best that we connect. And I wish you well. I wish you happiness. You have to do what you have to do, because motive is important. And we alluded to it a minute ago, but let's really dive into motive. Why is it that you see people trying to connect harder and harder? What do you find is the number one motive when people come to you and say, help me get more strategic on LinkedIn? What's their main motive?
It depends. Honestly, everyone has a different motive and a different goal on LinkedIn. There are a lot of job seekers on the platform, a lot of people who are out of work right now, especially now, and they just want to find their next opportunity. There are people who are in sales And there's only so many doors to knock on right now because we're still in the pandemic. So there's only so many different avenues they can go on to meet those sales goals. And then there's business owners who still want to grow their business and still want to be successful. And they only have so many doors to knock on. So it all depends. Everyone has a different goal. But I feel like LinkedIn can help so many people, regardless of what your goal is, if you're doing it the right way and if you have the right strategy behind it.
That's awesome. I am so we could do an hour just on that, but I want to step aside, take a quick break. We come back. I want to get into your story because you shared a post a few days ago. That's a really important part of your story. And I reached out to you and I told you, I said that really touched me. And so you're going to get to hear in Deanna's own words the story behind this story. Back in just a moment on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Hey, everybody, Brian Sexton. Want to tell you about my new book, People Buy From People, 10 Powerful People Lessons from the Ultimate People Person. My dad was one of the greatest connectors that I ever knew. And he shared with me 10 connecting principles that I have used throughout my 25-year sales and sales management, customer engagement, and leadership career that I'm passing along to you. If you want to be a stronger, deeper, and more powerful connector, you've got to pick up a copy of People Buy From People. There are concepts in there that you may not realize help make you a power connector. You can go to Amazon and pick it up, Kindle if you're an e-reader and you like to do it that way, or now available on Audible. And there's one other way you can get a copy of People Buy From People. You can get one from me and I'll sign it for you. You go to intentionalmediaandpublishing@gmail.com and send me an email, and I'll share with you the link on how you can get a signed copy. You can buy a signed copy directly from me. Again, People Buy From People. If you want to connect like never before, pick up your copy today of People Buy From People. And now let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Deanna, let's get into your story and let's go as far back. And listen, I would be normally I'm trying to make people laugh and crack people up and things like that. And you have held the line there. I'm telling you, you have done well today. You have not fallen into my traps of frivolity. So good on you. I appreciate that. But, and we've had a great conversation. I am grateful for the conversation that we've had already. But let's get into your story. Take me as far back as you want to go from point A to today.
Okay, so growing up, I only have one sister. Okay, I have one sister. We are 4 years apart. And 1997 to 1998 was kind of a turning point for us as sisters, because I graduated college, I moved away, I moved out of my parents' house. She graduated from high school and moved off to college. And so suddenly, growing up as siblings, we reached a turning point in our relationship because we became adults, and all of a sudden there's a different dynamic in our relationship. Well, little did we know that dynamic wasn't going to last for very long, because March 6, 1998, it was her last Friday at home before she was headed back to school. So I had called over to my parents' house, and she answered the phone, jumped on it super quick. And back in 1998, there were no cell phones, there were no text messages. So you were pretty much like waiting by the phone for someone to call. So she had called all over town waiting for her friends to call. And she jumped on the phone and she said, like, very anxious in her voice. She's like, "Hello?" I said, "Hi, can I talk to Mom?" And she's like, "Oh, it's just you."
Yeah,
It's just you.
it's just your older, it's
Yeah,
just your big
it's just your big
sister.
sister.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised
So
you didn't
she
get the
rolled her
quick
eyes.
Deanna, I'm surprised you didn't get the quick hang up like, oh, that's not the call I was expecting. Click, you know. And you did, and
Oh,
growing, and in those days, listen, in those days with no cell phones, you had the one guardian of the phone. So if your
yes.
brother, so I had a younger sister. If
Yeah.
my younger sister were mad at me, she could hang up. She's like, oh, like who called? Nobody. And you've been waiting on that call. You're like, and then your friend or girlfriend was like, I tried to call you. Are you mad at me? And I'm like, no, my sister never told me you called. Like and your parents, my dad, this was my dad. If somebody called and you forgot to tell him that somebody called for him,
Oh,
oh
you'd be in
man.
deep trouble.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought the flashback to us that are in our mid to
Yes.
late 40s so that,
Yep.
we
Yeah,
fondly
do you
remember those
remember when
times.
there was only one phone and you were a slave to that phone and you didn't have a cell phone all the time and you weren't like
Yeah.
instantly connected to someone and someone had to leave messages. So she called her friends all over town leaving messages, and so she was waiting for her friends to call her back. And now, if you were to tell a teenager the story, they'd be like, mind blown. What do you mean? Someone's not texting me?
Back in the dark ages, yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, back in the dark ages. Yeah. I have a 20-year-old son, and you try to tell him something that happened pre-1994, and it's
Yep.
like it might as well have been 1894,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
the 1980s are and the 1980s are even ancienter than that, and
oh
God
yeah.
forbid the 70s,
Uh-huh.
God
Yeah,
forbid
the
the 19.
oldies.
Yeah, it's like, my God, are you just that decrepit, So March 6, 1988, you
March
call home.
6th, 1998. So I called
1998.
over
I'm
there.
sorry, 1988 would have messed the timeline.
That would have been
Forgive me.
really much earlier.
Yeah.
1998. So I called over there to ask my mother something. I was working on my resume, and she answered the phone and said, "Oh, it's just you." And then she handed over the phone to Mom. Well, I didn't realize at that time that that was the only time that I would hear her speaking to me. Because what happened that day, eventually that phone did ring, and it was her friend. She went out with her friend Katie that night. And the two girls had really so much fun because they hadn't seen each other in months. And Karen was only home on spring break for so much time before she was headed back to the dorm. So she had all these people that she wanted to connect with. So she went out with her friend Katie, and they went to the McKinley Mall. It was a mall just south of Buffalo, New York, where we're from. And they had a great time laughing and catching up in the mall, hanging out as teenagers do. They bumped into my parents, who were headed to a movie, and they reminded Karen that she had a curfew. And after she rolled her eyes again, as an 18-year-old girl does, she rolled her eyes and she's like, don't worry, I'll be home. Well, instead of coming home to that movie, instead of coming home to Karen, they came home. Well, Karen would have been watching TV, listening to music, talking on the phone with friends, whatever. They came home to a blinking light on their answering machine. And even to this day, every single time that their answering machine blinks, they still take a deep breath and pray that it's not the message that they got on March 6, 1998. It was a nurse from Mercy Hospital, and the message was to get to the hospital as quick as they could and that Karen was involved in an accident. That's all they knew. So when my phone rang at 12:22 in the morning, I lived very close to the hospital. So my then boyfriend, now husband, and I, we got there first. And we walked in to find dozens of police officers.
So let me jump in here and ask
Yeah.
you this. So your parents see your sister at the mall. Your mom and dad are getting ready to go see a movie. Your sister Karen was going to be doing something else. Was there a couple hour window between when they saw her and do you guys know what her and her friend were doing at that time, where they had gone, things like that?
Yes.
So you guys have been able to, over the last 22, 23 years now, you've been able to really piece a timeline together between when your
Right.
parents saw her and the time of the accident.
Right. So what happened was they went to the mall, and after the two girls went to the mall, they went back to Katie's house. And Katie's mom had asked the girls to go pick up Katie's grandma, who lived just a short distance away. So that was their plan. They would go get grandma, and then afterwards, the plan was to go get milkshakes. And that was about 9:30 or so at night, was that they were going to run this errand, and then the plan was to get milkshakes. Well, when my parents had seen them, I believe it was like 7:30, 8 o'clock. Maybe it was like 8:30. And then they had this they went to this movie. So 9:30 or so is when the crash, it was about 9:45 is when the crash actually happened. And what happened was Katie was driving down a 30-mile-per-hour road. Another driver was speeding. The police said about 55 in a 30, crossed over that double yellow line and struck the car that Karen was riding in the front passenger seat and Katie was driving. And the impact was pretty severe. It was the impact sent both cars over to the side of the road. Katie survived. Karen was killed almost instantly. So my phone rang at 12:22 in the morning. I went to the hospital. All this police officers, they took us from one room to another room, and they said, wait here until your parents get here. So my parents came in, and they said a police investigator came into the room, and he said there was an accident and Karen didn't make it. Karen didn't make it. Honestly, that was it. That was how they told us. And then our lives haven't been the same since. And it was because of a drunk driver. So backing up a little bit, about 4:30 in the afternoon, 5 hours before the crash, this guy had been at a service station to get his car looked at. And as the worker had been cashing him out, he looked at him and he said, you don't look like you should be driving. So he called police. The individual was still able to pull out of that parking lot, but the police stopped him right as he did, and they gave him all the sobriety tests. At that time, he blew a .04, which wasn't legally drunk in 1998, isn't legally drunk now, but he was driving without a license and without registration. So they held him on an $80 bond, $80 and 5 hours. And someone paid his bond. Someone gave him his keys. That still has not been determined who the person was that gave him his keys. He went over to the parking lot where the car was parked and got his car, stopped at a bar to drink more, and then came speeding down the street that Katie and Karen were on the opposite side of the road.
Did they make it to pick up Katie's grandmother, or was she in the car with them at the time?
No, Katie's grandma was not in the car at the time.
Wow.
It was just the two girls.
Just the two of them. And so your family gets this chilling, sobering news. Just simply, she didn't make it. Take me through the next little bit of the emotions you felt, because you had just had a conversation with your sister and she said, oh, it's you, or it's just you. Are you having flashbacks in that moment to that last conversation? And just kind of take me through your emotions. And again, if what I'm asking is too deep or something like that, I totally understand. I want folks to understand if they've never been in that situation, because Deanna, I remember getting the phone call from my sister the morning my dad passed away in his sleep. You're just, it's a blowback moment. And so what were your emotions like?
Looking back at it, I think it was shock. I felt like I was in another reality. I felt like it was almost an out of body experience, a scene from a movie. I felt like it wasn't real for a long time. I felt like it wasn't real. And even now, talking about her and still knowing that she's never coming back, even all these years later, it's really a hard thing to digest. When I see people's relationships with their siblings as adults, that's hard. That's
Yeah.
super hard for me because she's not here. And that's one thing that I've been robbed from. Or to see kids with their aunts and uncles and to know that she should be here with my kids.
Yeah.
That's really hard. But in that particular instance, it was just like weird. It was weird and bizarre is the only way to explain it, because it wasn't like it was reality. It wasn't like it was actually happening, because it was so sudden and I didn't see it coming. No one saw it coming, and all of a sudden she's robbed from us. And that's really the only way to explain it, is it was a sudden tragedy that is preventable. And that's the reason why I told the story on LinkedIn just a couple of days ago, because it was the anniversary of it.
Yeah.
And when I told the story, I wanted people to know that this happened and she was a real person, and that I have been speaking out against drunk driving since 1998, and I will continue to do it because I feel like it's a story and it's a person, and they need to know that it's not just statistics and it doesn't just happen to other people. So
No, you're 100% right. And that's why I wanted you to tell the story on the podcast, because a lot of times when we write something or we post something, it's not as and I'm not saying that wasn't powerful, but speaking it, seeing your emotions, and those of you watching on YouTube, seeing your emotions, I can see your emotions on your face. I want to ask you, if you could go back in time now and walk into that hospital room or walk into that hospital and put your arm around 23-year-old Deanna and her mom and her dad, how would you try to comfort them? How would you try to comfort in that moment and encourage?
I think what I would say is that you don't know it now, but your life is about to have a new mission. You don't realize this now, but you're about to help people through this experience. Because one thing people have told me through all of these years later is that, believe it or not, as hard as it is to tell the story, you're helping people. You're helping people that you don't know, people that you'll never meet. And that's really my end goal, is that if one person gets something from the story, then I feel like I've done my job. So I think if I had to go back in time and tell them anything, it would be that, as painful as this is, there is going to be some good that comes out of it. And the good is that I'm not going to stop speaking about what happened ever.
What did you learn about yourself that you didn't know, or a strength that you had? Because I'm trying, when people tell stories, Deanna, I try to walk with them in that moment. Obviously, the faces of your parents, the face. I can't make out faces, but as you try to put yourself and you walk with folks in the story, you try to see the setting, you try to see, and you've done a brilliant job of painting the picture, of putting us in that moment where the hospital is full of police officers and investigators and things like that. What did you learn about yourself in that moment? And what did you learn about your parents in that moment?
That as much as I looked up to my parents, they are still human beings, and they are still vulnerable to feel the pain, seeing the pain in their faces, I'll never forget that as long as I live. And even to this day, I tell everybody that they're the strongest people I know, because I cannot imagine, now that I have kids of my own, going through what they went through. And what I learned about myself is I have a strength and I have a capacity in myself to take something so horrible and so tragic and help people by doing it. And honestly, I think that goes back to my company too. So even though I'm not, my company, my business is not about anything involved with drunk driving, I still feel like it's in me to encourage and to help others. So whether I'm doing that on LinkedIn or whether I'm doing that by telling Karen's story and preventing lives being lost, I feel like that's just me. That's what I need to do, is to help others and to use my voice as a service. So
What do you think Karen would say about your company and the way you're using your company to help people? Because what you just said was so beautiful there. You said, I didn't realize that from that moment on, basically your purpose in life, you felt like, was to help somebody else and to help other people. What do you think Karen would say about what you're doing now?
I think she would be proud of me. I think she would. I have people that tell me that she would be proud of what I built, and that there is a lot of different directions that this company could go in, being so young as it is, and that I think she would be one of my biggest cheerleaders.
I've got to ask one more question around that, if you don't mind. What did the world miss by not having Karen in it the last 23 years?
This is when I bite my bottom lip and pray that the emotions don't come out.
It's okay. And if I've asked a hard question, I apologize.
I can do it. I can do it. She was a freshman at St. Bonaventure University, like a small university, private university south of Buffalo.
Yeah, it's in Ole in New York. It's not. I've been to Ole in New York. It's a lovely little town. Yes,
it is. So she was majoring in sports medicine, and the reason why she went into that was she wanted to help people. Maybe we have something in common there. And she had learned in just her freshman year. I mean, she was only in the second semester of her freshman year. She was learning how to take care of the sprains, the strains, the torn ACLs, all of those sports injuries that you'd hear about. And she would go to the basketball games. She would go to all the sporting events, and she would soak everything in. And in just a few weeks before this happened, she had been named as trainer to the girls' softball team, which she thought was the biggest, hugest deal, because she had played softball from age 6 to age 18. So she didn't get to Bonaventure on a softball scholarship. She didn't make the softball team, but to be named as trainer to the school softball team was the next best thing. And so that was a big, huge honor for her. She was super excited about that. Super excited. So looking at what she accomplished in such a short period of time makes me think that she probably could have done just about anything when it comes to sports medicine. She could have ended up at a professional team. She could have gotten married and had children. My kids would probably have cousins. Yeah, there would be a lot. I think the world was robbed of a really beautiful and remarkable young woman needless to say, she was a friend to so many people. And I only get reminded of that, and not only, but I get reminded of it on a consistent basis every single anniversary and every single birthday of how much they think about her on a regular daily basis. Her friends constantly tell me, even when in the anniversary, they said, she's around us. We know that she's with us all the time.
That's the most beautiful thing about death, because Deanna, when I was, again, I can empathize with you losing my father suddenly, not in the same manner, but you understand that. And when I was writing my book, the stories I was relating about my dad, he was very much alive in my mind. I heard his voice, I saw his face. And those memories are one thing that death can never take from us. That death can never take that from us.
Yep.
And that's the beautiful part, is that those people live and are still very much alive in our minds and our hearts and things like that. I want you, if you would, to talk to somebody that may have gone through either recently, COVID has taken people suddenly like that as we record this in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know you've got some intentional encouragement for folks out there that have walked that road or are walking that road as you and your family did. What's your biggest piece of intentional encouragement?
If someone tells you to get over it, ignore them. If someone tells you you should be done grieving, that's not for them to decide. It is for you to decide. You grieve however you need to grieve at that moment. If you feel like crying one day and being happy the next day, then you do it. If you feel like you need to go into a quiet place and write a story about your loved one, do it. Do whatever you feel you need to do at the time to deal with that pain that you are feeling in your heart.
Wow. Yeah. And I wrote that down. If someone tells you to get over it, ignore them. That is powerful, and 100% right. Because my wife told me, she said, you're not normal. You don't grieve like everybody else. Because I didn't really cry much, but then the times that I was by myself and I thought about my dad and stuff, I broke down. And I'm more in touch with my emotions now, 8 years later, than I've ever been. I cry a lot easier. And I know it was because of losing my dad. And so I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, thank you for choosing this podcast, for your story to be told, and your sister's story. And we remember Karen today on this day. Happy birthday to your child. We gotta keep that in mind. Again,
Yep.
you
want
life.
to hear something, Brian? I have to share a story.
No, please go.
So,
please.
My daughter's due date was the anniversary of my sister's death.
Wow.
And all these years later, looking at her and then looking at a picture of my sister, it's crazy, the resemblance. She didn't arrive on her due date. Few babies actually arrive when they're expected to, but there is a date that will forever be the anniversary. And then there's 3 days later where my daughter celebrates her birthday, and she has her Aunt Karen's middle name. So there is a continued, it's not often, I get emotional when I think about it. It's not often that I put this side by side, but I have people that remind me that there is a special angel that is looking over me and all three of my kids.
Yeah.
Who knew out of all the dates in the world?
Well, as you know, here's the thing. And I jokingly said this to my wife a little while ago and one of her coworkers. And I say that about my son. I say, look, as long as I'm alive, as long as he's alive, I'll never die. And the connection of your daughter as long as your daughter's alive, that connection to your sister continues to live on. And if your daughter lives a long, healthy life, and I pray that she does, that's going to live on. I mean, you're talking about no matter, your daughter could live to be in her 90s, right? And so that connection still lives for a century. That's pretty wild to think about it, how those connections just continue to live on. I'm so glad you dropped that little vignette in there. That's the icing on the cake, Deanna. Tell folks how to get connected with you on all of your platforms and to reach out to you, get your content, get connected with you, because once they hear this story, they're going to want to connect with you.
You got it. So the best place to get connected with me is LinkedIn. Just look up Deanna Russo on LinkedIn and you will find me. Deanna Russo 1 is the LinkedIn URL if you want to look it up that way. But honestly, and please send me a message when you connect with me that you heard me on Brian's podcast, because it would be a no-brainer as opposed to someone who just sends me a blind connection request. Please tell me that you heard about on the podcast, because then I won't have to think so much and do research on you.
Yeah. Tell Deanna when you connect with her that you heard her on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Absolutely.
Or absolutely just say, I heard you on Brian Sexton's podcast. But yeah, that's so true. That's a great point, again, because you get inundated with connection requests and things like that. And so, Deanna, from the bottom of my heart, I am so humbled and grateful and thankful that you shared your story here in your own words on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.